I'd like to call this meeting to order. Subcommittee. Going to get started with a statement. Once again, the VA delivered its testimony to this subcommittee late, only 3 hours before this hearing. I've mentioned this in hearings before, and I'm starting to feel like talking to a brick wall or a broken record. The Congress always solicits testimony from the executive branch agencies and gives it great respect, even when we fiercely disagree. This exchange of views between the legislative branch and the executive branch is fundamental under the Constitution. When the VA's testimony is so late that we may not be able to read it in advance, that is disrespectful, and it undermines this process. I urge witnesses and all the people in all the layers of the VA and the White House bureaucracy who wrote the testimony to do better, not just for this committee's sake, but for the benefit of all the veterans who ultimately will be impacted by this. Good afternoon. Today, we will examine the Biden administration's budget request for the VA Office of Information and Technology. I want to thank our witnesses from OIT for joining us to help understand this request. It is by far the most unusual VA information technology budget that we have seen since this subcommittee was created. Factoring in all the funding sources, including the Toxic Exposure Fund, one-time dollars, transfers, reimbursements, and carryover, it constitutes a 3.3% cut to $7.9 billion. I have no doubt there is waste in the VA budget, and there is at least 3% of unproductive bureaucracy and padded contracts that should be cut. However, the administration seems to be proposing the cuts in an incredibly lopsided, damaging way. Development would take a 99% cut. I'm all for reducing spending, but even I don't make recommendations about a 99% cut, especially in development. IT modernization, which is one of the top priorities of the President Biden's federal chief information officer, would take an 81% cut. VA's infrastructure readiness program, which we have heard is vital on many occasions, is being proposed a 66% cut. Technology for the Veterans Benefits Administration, which has had serious problems over the last year, would get a 41% cut. Meanwhile, staffing and administrative expenses would increase by 5%. And operations and maintenance takes about a $100 million or a 2% cut in the base budget request, but then gets boosted by more than $1.3 billion from the Toxic Exposure Fund. It's hard to make sense of what would increase and what would actually be cut. We may hear that the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which was a top-line budget agreement between the President and the former Speaker, forced these cuts. But that explanation does not stand scrutiny. That budget agreement and the current budget agreement specifically exempted veterans' health care, which is about 80% of the VA discretionary spending. It is true that if the administration decided to spend above the negotiated levels, they would need to make cuts in other areas of the VA. That may be what we are seeing happen right now. Congress has always met VA's budget requests, but I don't think any Congress should ever appropriate more money than an agency asks for. Therefore, even though I do not have much confidence in this OIT budget, I need to understand in detail how it would be implemented. We need to know whether the special salary rate is accomplishing its objective to recruit superior talent. And we need to understand what kind of pressure it's putting on the payroll at OIT's overall budget. As we recently saw with the critical skills incentive payments to the VBA and VHA executives, this sort of pay increase can get out of control. The original purpose can quickly be forgotten, and it can be easy to hand out raises with other people's money. I'm very concerned that an unsustainable payroll can actually undermine recruitment and retention and drive away top talent. Strong management will be very important to navigate OIT through the next few years. Once again, I want to welcome our witnesses to discuss these important issues. And with that, I yield to Ranking Member Surplus McCormick for opening statements.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for holding this hearing to discuss VA's IT budget request for fiscal year 2025. The Department of Veteran Affairs is tasked with providing world-class health care and benefits to our nation's veterans. It is part of the pact that we make with young people when they sign up to serve and defend our nation. However, given the rapidly increasing cost of community care, I'm concerned that we are creating a situation where VA will have to cannibalize other service lines and programs to pay the bills. Unfortunately, in this situation and throughout healthcare, IT is one of the most frequent victims. IT is the backbone of VA. Pretty much everything VA does happens on computers, so it's critical that we ensure that this budget properly reflects our commitment to our veterans. During last month's hearing on VA's overall budget, we heard about the growth in other parts of VA, but it appears that the IT budget is not keeping pace. If we are not ensuring that frontline VA staff have the appropriate tools to do their job, we are not doing right by our veterans. We've heard horror stories of it taking upwards to 10 minutes for an employee to log into their computers. 10 minutes. In this digital era, in 2024, 10 minutes. That's totally ridiculous. It is a clear symptom of the long-term neglect of VA's IT infrastructure. Despite these issues, it appears VA is cutting the budget for its infrastructure readiness program by 65%. Crucially, the IRP was intended to address VA's technical debt caused by chronic neglect of its IT infrastructure. I'm afraid this budget request will only handicap the IRP's efforts. If we are not prioritizing VA's IT infrastructure, none of its other modernization efforts are likely to be made to make any meaningful difference. It's like buying a new sports car and driving it on a dirt road. Eventually, it's going to fall apart. While we are on the topic of modernization, I've noticed that there are near 50% cuts to VA IT modernization budget at a time when there are several major IT modernization efforts underway. This budget seems likely to cause major issues. I don't see how the VA can keep projects like modernization of the Veterans Benefit Management System, FMBT, and Digital GI Bill moving with this budget cut. I hope to hear from CIO how this is going to work. And perhaps most importantly, I'm concerned about the IT workforce budget. While there was a modest 5% increase, I'm concerned that it doesn't keep pace with the OIT's expanded authorities to provide special salary rates for its people. I fear supporting those SSRs will force OIT to decrease the number of its people it has. Expecting VA's IT folks to do more work with less people is going to have a lasting impact on retention. The pay raises won't be enough to prevent people from resigning. On an opposite note, I will say that I'm happy to see that the VA is increasing its investment in cybersecurity. Healthcare organizations are a prime target for hackers and other bad actors. It is critical that VA defend the massive trove of veterans' data that it has been entrusted with, but it is also critical that VA protect its ability to provide care and benefits to veterans. This became incredibly apparent in the aftermath of the Change Healthcare cyber attack. VA is still dealing with the fallout of that incident as it and Change Healthcare attempt to identify which Change products are in use by VA. It now been more than 2 months since the breach, and we still don't know what, if any, veterans' data was exposed. I understand that Change wants to be certain, but I'm concerned that the risk to veterans and their families grows every day that they fail to disclose the impact. We cannot allow our veterans' financial lives to be decimated by the attack on a VA partner. I expect better from the VA contractors and hope that this gets rectified soon. With that said, I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today and look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you, Ranking Member Surplus McCormick. I will now introduce the witnesses on our first and only panel. First, from the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have the Assistant Secretary for Information and Technology, Mr. Kurt Del Benny. We also have the Principal Deputy Chief Information Officer, Mr. Dwayne Beard. Finally, we have the OIT Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Tim Pitts, and the Chief People Officer, Mr. Nathan Tierney. I ask the witnesses to please stand and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to provide is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you, and let the record reflect that each of the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Mr. Delmeny, you are now recognized for 5 minutes to deliver your opening statement on behalf of VA.
Thank you, Chairman Rosendale. The first thing I'd like to say is we apologize for the lateness of the testimony. I will assure you it's not through a lack of respect for the committee, and that a great deal of work went on to create it. So, but you have my apologies for the lack of timeliness of the testimony. So, just wanted to say that up front. But Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Member Scherflis, McCormick, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of the President's fiscal year 25 budget of information technology request for the Department of Veterans Affairs, and for your longstanding support of veterans and their families. I'm accompanied by Mr. Dwayne Beard, Principal Deputy Secretary of Information Technology, Deputy CIO, Dr. Timothy Pitts, OIT's Chief Financial Officer and Deputy CIO for IT Budget and Finance, and Mr. Nathan Tierney, OIT's Chief People Officer and Deputy CIO of the Office of People Science. VA is committed to providing veterans a seamless, secure, and unified digital experience through state-of-the-art technology. Technology has become the very foundation of the VA's ability to deliver on its mission and to continue to provide world-class care and benefits to more veterans than ever before. The President's fiscal year 25 budget provides $7.6 billion for VA IT systems and telecommunications support, including $6.2 billion in base discretionary funding. In addition, there is $1.4 billion in mandatory toxic exposure fund, or TEF funding, to continue the modernization of systems under the authorized under PACT Act of 2022. OIT will make focused IT investments in cybersecurity, the IT workforce, and modernization. The total FY25 budget for IT is $49 million, is down by $49 million, or 0.6%, below the FY24 enacted level. Base discretionary funding for IT is $169 million, or 2.6%, below the fiscal year 24 enacted level, while TEF funding is $121 million, or 9.7%, above the fiscal year 24 enacted level. The fiscal year 25 staffing and administration support services request of $1.686 billion funds 8,310 full-time employees, or FTE. That is 160, or 2%, above the fiscal year 24 enacted level. The FY25 budget provides $670 million for cybersecurity and to accelerate VA's zero trust acceleration efforts, $118 million, or 21% increase in the base funding relative to the fiscal year 24 level. OIT will bridge the FY24 enacted level and the FY25 budget request to ensure consistent support of key initiatives. Where practical, OIT will accelerate certain investments in fiscal year 24 based on the operating plan and scale back other investments in technology roadmaps. This ensures we have an investment plan that balances resources with key initiatives to support continuity of veteran health care and benefits and represents a consistent strategy over the 2 years. To successfully execute on the FY25 budget, VA will continue to manage its IT budget with transparency. OIT is taking a critical look at all legacy projects, established projects, and newly proposed programs as well. We're evaluating the value that those projects bring to mission delivery and determining if those funds can better be used elsewhere, especially in areas of IT modernization, cybersecurity, and IT workforce, which are vital in maintaining VA's digital transformation efforts in pursuit of more efficient and impactful service delivery to our veterans. The TEF funding from Congress is instrumental in furthering VA's IT modernization efforts. OIT is exercising extreme discipline in allocating TEF investments, ensuring a strong relationship between IT and the delivery of healthcare and benefits relative to toxic exposure when modernizing related IT systems. We recognize the necessity of trade-offs and remain committed to strategically scrutinizing where we deploy those investments. When veterans leverage technology access to VA services, they trust that the underlying digital ecosystem is safe, reliable, and secure. For this reason, OIT has maintained cybersecurity as a priority in fiscal year 25. This will help us to deliver a robust and resilient security posture for the 9 million veterans using VA care and benefits and hundreds of thousands of VA employees and contractors who access their network every day. As VA prioritizes key investments, we must also recruit, retain, and upskill current IT workforce of over 8,000 individuals. VA is working hard to modernize its workforce with targeted strategies. These include hiring cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, continuously talent development, incentives, and focused field staff expansion to support veteran health and benefits mission. IT modernization is essential for achieving our goals as the 21st century in the VA, where VA stands in the forefront of delivering veterans seamless digital experience. VA will prioritize these funds in the most essential modernization initiatives that bolster the department's ability to serve veterans. VA's model of addressing IT improvements incrementally rather than via large system replacement projects will help us manage IT spend, reduce vulnerability to cyber threats, and strategically scale IT modernization. Chairman Rosendale, Ranking Members Sherfuss and McCormick, and members of the subcommittee, I want to thank you for allowing us to appear today. We remain responsible stewards of our funding and committed to maximizing the effectiveness of our investments through the VA enterprise. I look forward to continue to work with you in this subcommittee to address the greatest priorities of the digital transformation in fiscal year 25. That concludes my testimony, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Del Bene. The written statement of Mr. Del Bene will be entered into the record. We're now going to proceed to questioning, and I will recognize myself for 5 minutes. Mr. Del Bene, when everything is factored in, the White House's budget for OIT amounts to a 3.3% cut, which I mentioned in my opening statement. Within that, development is being cut by 99%. Operation and maintenance is cut and then plussed up by the Toxic Exposure Fund, and staffing and admin is increasing by about 5%. Do you stand by this budget request, and what are the consequences of that going to be as far as the, as you said, the integration of the delivery of health care and its reliance on OIT?
Thank you for the question. As you know, and everybody knows from their own family experiences, the budgets are challenging things that involve trade-offs, investments here and modulation there. The Financial Responsibility Act certainly creates an overall top-level budget cap that we need to respect. And we figured there are difficult choices that have to be made across the entire administration. So I respect the challenges of making those cuts.
So how is that, Mr. Del Bene, how is that going to impact the delivery of health care and this integration of the information and the benefits that the veterans have earned?
So it will require us, it is a challenging budget for us, I'll say that up front. It will require us to be very focused in where we invest. We have taken the initiatives that the administration overall wants to focus on, and we agree with those initiatives. The areas like cybersecurity we are bolstering because that's absolutely critical in the complexity of our organization in particular, in the growing threat actors' sophistication. At the same time, what we're going to have to do is take the development and modernization funds and judiciously allocate those against the highest priority projects that we have. My goal, and I think this is accomplishable, is we will not hamper veteran care as a result of this. But I will tell you, we are going to have to be very targeted in our investment.
40, 60, and 99% cuts in the areas of IT that are going to be instrumental in making sure that we have smooth delivery of those services. I think you have more than a challenge, but and again, it seems that we're shifting it over to payroll. Mr. Del Bene, the cuts fall heavily on the development sub-account. How was that decision made? Is that something that you make? Is that you make these recommendations? How is that decision made?
Thanks for the question. The first thing I'd like to address the question of it moving over to HR. It actually is not a significant move over to the HR.
Okay, well, we're going to go into that later on.
I just wanted to correct
how was
the
decision made on this funding being stripped away from the development sub-account?
Well, as you know, we submit a budget to the administration, and there's a back and forth process that goes on.
So the initial submittal that you made to the administration, did it reflect that reduction?
It did
by
not.
99%?
It did not.
Okay, what was the initial reduction that you recommended?
I'd have to take that for the record to make
Please
sure that
do.
get
I would
something
like to
back.
know what that original reduction was.
If
that
I
you
may I
recommended.
address
Let
one
me
more?
move on. I've got a minute and 39. Who decided to spend nearly all the toxic exposure fund dollars on operation and maintenance, but zero on development? Was this another one of your decisions?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, because what I wanted to clarify is this distinction between what is development and what is maintenance is actually a little bit more sophisticated than the terms apply. We can do a lot of development under what would be called a maintenance budget, because those are programs that
Mr.
are
Del
already
Benny,
in
that's
place.
great, but I have sheets here, okay, that show where, and I have to go by those spreadsheets, okay? So again, who decided to spend nearly all the toxic exposure fund dollars on operation and maintenance, but zero on development?
Well, that's what I was trying to explain. Because systems like VBMS are actually established programs, we're actually enabled to do what you might consider
So are you telling me
development.
that you're actually using funds for development that most people are thinking are going to be used for operation and maintenance?
Not exactly. I'm saying that what is defined as maintenance, others might think of as development, because it's an established program. That
I'm
can
going
go
by the
under-
spreadsheet. Does the spreadsheet reflect information that's not accurate and that you're actually moving funds into development that are supposed to go to operation and maintenance?
It absolutely does not.
Okay, then we're talking about the same thing. Who made that decision about operations and maintenance and then zero going to development?
Well, thank you for the question. I actually believe that the investments we're doing on the benefit side, thanks to the TEF funds, are actually very robust and strong, and I feel very good about that. So through the use of the funds in the appropriate way, and as I said in my testimony, we're being
Well,
very...
Mr. Del Benny, your testimony, you're telling me that we don't understand how the funds are being spent, and I've got a spreadsheet that says operation and maintenance, and I've got a spreadsheet that says development. So you're either spending it on development or you're not. And if you're telling me that you're moving some of these funds around, then clearly you're not. With that, I'm going to yield to Ranking Member Sheriff-List McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Mr. Del Benny. With almost 10% increase in overall funding at VA, how do you explain the decrease in funding for information technology?
I think that there are requirements across the VA and where money has to be spent. There's an increase in demand in terms of healthcare. There's an increase in demand in terms of benefits. It's a balancing act where we have to figure out where we're going to spend the money and not. We will figure out how to, and we already have planning in place to figure out how to live within the budget that we have. As I said, we're going to have to make some very strict trade-offs. I will also say I'm very proud of how the team has come together to have a very clear prioritization scheme that they use. And so whereas before we may have been allocating to a project that may not have been as high a priority, I feel very good that going into the 25 budget, we will be able to assiduously assign the dollars to those most pressing needs.
And do you think that the budget request is sufficient to support VA's IT requirements for today and into the future?
I do think that we will be able to address the critical projects that we need to address in FY25 with this budget. Having said that, I think we're making some trade-offs which will not work well if we sustain those over multiple years. One of them, if I may, one of them in particular is the Modernization Fund, which you mentioned in your opening statements. We are at a reduced level in this year, but that's going to have to be plussed up in future years because you can't just continue to be at a lower level in terms of your modernization funds.
Well, that's my next question where I was going to.
Okay.
There are several major IT modernization efforts currently underway at VA. So I was quite surprised to see the drastic cuts to the IT modernization budget, especially since we've had a hearing last month discussing yet another major modernization effort in the works. Is this budget request sufficient to keep all of these modernization efforts moving forward at their expected pace?
I think we're going to have to make some trade-offs, and we're going to have to figure out what we're going to reduce the funding in. I think we get there's a lot of projects in place, as you say. They also come up every day when you all want the systems to do new things. We have to figure out development plans. I think the only way we're going to get through, and the way we will get through, is through very strict prioritization of the work that we do.
Do you know of any projects offhand that you think would be traded off or de-emphasized?
Well, the one in particular is if you take the 4-year typical life cycle of a computer, That's about $150 million that it would take the annual spend at our current rate of PCs. That will be reduced fairly significantly, I think, to the sort of the $15 to $20 million level. And so we will replace PCs less frequently as a result. That's where my point is that we can't continue to do that every year. But I feel like especially with some of the funding we've got recently and the fact the fleet has been updated, we can do that for 1 year and make that through. But we're going to have to be diligent about it in future years.
What would be the impact on programs such as FMBT? Will this budget cause delays in that project?
We are looking at that right now. FMBT remains a priority for us, and we're going to have to figure out the right funding to get there.
And how will these cuts impact the broader OIT mission?
I think we intend for it not to impact the broad mission. We intend to be very strict in our allocation of resources so that it does not impact the delivery of critical services to any of the agencies underneath the VA.
My next question is going to be for Mr. Pitts. While I was grateful to see that 20% increase in the cybersecurity funding, VA remains among the lowest in cybersecurity funding in the federal government. VA also holds a large amount of person health information and personal identifiable information. How can you explain this disparity?
The investment in cybersecurity in fiscal year from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25 resulted. Give me 1 moment, please. Resulted in a 28% increase, $169 million. Now that's a small drop in the bucket of where we need to go with our cybersecurity, but as more requirements are coming in from the National Cybersecurity Strategy from the White House, and as we begin to identify how cybersecurity is also part of the way we need to modernize, so they go hand in hand, the intent is to continue to move cybersecurity to the direction it needs to go at the VA.
I'll yield back just because my time has run out, and I'll come back in my next questioning. Thank you.
I would now yield 5 minutes to Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to delve into some of the IT issues beyond the budget. Mr. Del Bene, we've had the Change Healthcare hack and the Microsoft Exchange hack in the last few years. How familiar are you with the Executive Order 14028, which is basically improving the nation's cybersecurity?
I'm fairly familiar with that. So,
and describe how your office followed that playbook, which is, that's exactly what it is. It's a playbook following these cyber attacks quickly.
Sure, let me do it. I'll do it quickly. Basically, 14028 prescribes that we should follow a zero trust model. What that says is that you can't trust your perimeter to be a hardened defense against attackers. It has to be a multi-pronged strategy. I fervently believe in the zero trust model. We implemented it at Microsoft as well. We've been working on that model for the past 2 years that I've been here. And so I would, and not just with Change Healthcare, we've actually been working on that well before. I think Change Healthcare and the Microsoft hacks both do show the vulnerability that the entire industry has, though, and they do draw concern to me.
So when did both Change Healthcare and Microsoft start reporting, and did they report everything required from these two hacks?
I can't speak to whether they reported everything required. I will say that in both cases, we expressed to leadership of those companies that we're disappointed at the transparency and the speed with which they've delivered information to us.
Well, you may remember that Change Healthcare said there was a substantial portion of the people in America that may have been impacted. In fact, you notified 15 million veterans that they could have been impacted. I think we have, and you just alluded to it, I think we have the same problem that they had with Watergate some 50 years ago. What did they know and when did they know it? And I think today we still do not know what we don't know. Is that a correct statement?
It's different between CHC and Microsoft, and I say this not having spent a good portion of my career there. Microsoft has actually scanned through all of the data, at least in our portion of transactions and emails, and told us what they have found in its entirety. CHC has not done that yet, and we have been pushing them very hard. They basically said, as you say, a large portion of Americans, we believe they should be able to tell us what portion of those folks are and who they are that are veterans, if there are any, but we suspect there are.
Yeah, you mentioned Microsoft. The U.S. Cyber Safety Review Board, which was established in the executive order that we were just discussing, concluded that Microsoft committed a cascade of security failures, and the company's security culture needs an overhaul. Did you communicate with anyone at Microsoft about the Exchange hack? And if so, what did you discuss?
We did, and I was in that meeting as well, and we spoke with our executive representative, Paul Lorimer, who I know from my Microsoft days, and I will say that we were very blunt and direct with them about needing information from them on exactly what the exposure was. I'm not here to defend Microsoft. I mean, I think this, for them to get hacked in this way is a very concerning thing.
And did you report, we'll get into that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Representative Self. I now yield 5 minutes to Representative Landsman for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all. I'll be brief and sort of hand this over to you all as we sort of transition to the next round here. I just want to give you the opportunity to talk through anything that you felt like wasn't covered, that you want to make sure was clear. We didn't hear from everyone, so please use this time just to clarify and express, I think, the intent here, which is to make the argument for these investments, understanding, to the chair's point, the real trade-off, and appreciating the trade-off, which I suspect you all do.
Well, thank you for the question. I would say that the major theme here is, as I said, folks need to work within budgets. We have a budget. There are things we can do with more funds, but we will work within the budget. And I am proud of the fact that we've got a team now that actually can do that kind of math and that kind of prioritization. And actually, that's the way we work every day. We always have a one-to-end list. We publish that one-to-end list with you all, which says rack and stack. The first highest priority followed by the 150th looks exactly like this. And so that is the capability that allows us to be able to work within an environment that is more fiscally austere. I think there's more we could do, there's more I'd like to do, but I respect and understand where we're at, and I support it. I would like to spend some time maybe talking about, and I appreciate the flexibility you've given us, talk about this, what we've done in the HR space in particular, specifically the special salary rate, which has had a significant impact. It's something I'm actually proud of the work we've done there. So maybe I'll pass it over to Nate Tierney, our Chief People Officer, and have him speak a little bit about that.
Thank you, sir. Just to take a step back, whether you're in industry or in government, we went and looked at what does it take to get somebody to join the team? What are the attraction and attrition drivers in industry? And what we found is government is no different than the private sector, and that compensation was the top attraction and attrition driver. The second one followed by that is work-life balance, and a third is actually career tracks and development, growth. So armed with that information, right when I became the executive, we partnered with 4 other federal agencies to examine, is there in fact a pay gap between industry and government? And what we resulted in was that there was a pay gap of about 66%. What this means for all of you is if I want to hire a software developer in the federal government, I can't pay them enough to get somebody to come out of your Amazon, your Meta, or whatever other tech organization. So we had to do something. So we prepared the analysis. We submitted it to OPM in June of 2023. And then on January 11th, OPM approved our special salary rate with all the data and the tables that we submitted. From that, as Mr. Del Bene said, we implemented using the PACT Act authorities, the special salary rate. Now, here's why this is important. As I mentioned earlier, it's the top attraction and attrition driver. As a result of this, in the past 9 months, we've had an 80% increase in highly technical applicants per job announcement. We've had 48% fewer re-announcements, which means I don't have to pay the cost on that. We've had 64% less separations and 46% less retirements. This is critically important to us because almost 30% of our workforce is retirement eligible today. So when we talk about some of these systems like Vista and whatnot, we have to keep those people. So not only has it helped us on the retention front, it's also helped us in the attraction front and recruiting that top tier talent to allow us to be competitive. So those are just some of the benefits of the special salary rate. We're continuing to monitor it and keep that finger on the pulse and see if something else needs to be adjusted. But I just want to say thank you for the PACT Act authorities and your support of being the best in government for IT.
Thank you. Appreciate it, and I yield back.
Mr. Del Bene, you were talking about priorities. I was really glad to hear that because we all have to prioritize the work that we do and the resources that we dedicate towards that, whether it's time and or money. You're well aware of the troubles the VA.gov had and related systems over the past year. We've held 2 hearings about it. This budget request cuts VA.gov funding by $22 million, or 21%. Please explain to me the logic about that and how and then do you intend to provide the fixes or the improvements that need to be made?
Thanks for the question. There's prioritization of the budget overall, but then there's within each project what you choose to focus on. We have talked to you about the challenges we've had in VA.gov, and those become the first and most critical things we do. So I think I've been super consistent with the team that anything you have around quality, anything you have in terms of things like tracking applicants through the system, cybersecurity, you do those as a baseline before you think about adding new features. So
But the problem that we've had wasn't in cybersecurity, and I truly do appreciate the investments that's being made in cybersecurity to make sure that we protect our veterans' privacy and all of their data and information. What I'm saying is we've been hearing massive problems about VA.gov, okay? And it has very, very necessary needs for fixes and improvements. Sure. So explain to me how we're going to do that with a 21% cut.
Yeah, I was trying to explain is that we think of certain things as must-haves. Cybersecurity is just an example of another must-have. In the case of VA.gov, the remediations around tracking, around making sure we don't have those problems again, those are must-haves. What it will impact is the speed with which we deliver new features and new capabilities into that project will have to reduce by the budget that amount.
So basically, you're going to take the remaining part of that budget and focus that on actually repairing the system and make sure it functions properly.
We will make sure, first and foremost, that it functions properly and it's secure, and our rate of delivering new features will have to reduce.
The budget request seems to prioritize employee salaries over everything else. In black and white, that's what it looks like to us. That's our perception. I want to get into that, but first, are the contracts or contractors taking any cuts under this budget request? And if so, who and how much?
When we do a contract, there are established hourly rates based on the function of those contractors. Those are already in place, and they're based on what the market will bear. And so I don't think we would be effective in getting strong contractors if those rates were not successful, were not at the right place.
So are you telling me that you're not proposing any reductions in the contracts or contractors?
I didn't say that. What I'm saying is
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at, because we need to have plain language here. Are you proposing any reductions in the contracts or contractors? And if so, who and how much?
As you know, we use contractors quite a bit. It will be a necessity that the amount that we get, the work that we get from those contractors will have to reduce in order for us to meet the level of the budget.
So will you be able to provide to this committee the contractors that you propose reductions to, and who and how much you propose those reductions on?
we need to be engaged in, which we are with your staff, on a back and forth of exactly where our dollars are going from or going to across the year, and we're happy to provide that on an ongoing basis. It's going to be decisions that are made day to day, week to week, month to month, where we say, this particular project, we can't do all this, we're going to have to do this much. But we're happy to share all that with you. I believe in radical transparency with
So I really don't have a yes or no out of that if we're going to have reductions in spending for contracts and contractors.
I am confident there will be reductions in
Okay,
spending
I
on
would look forward to seeing those reductions and who they're actually being proposed to. Mr. Tierney, you got approval for a special salary rate for OIT employees in late 2022. Please explain what that entails. How many people were covered? How were they chosen? How large is it, the amount that was awarded out, and how much does it cost? And what is the purpose for it?
Thank you very much for the question. So first, the purpose behind the special salary rate was, as I mentioned, was to close that pay gap between industry and federal government in order to be able to attract and retain top-tier talent. So that would be able to recruit like your AI specialists, cybersecurity, software developers, et cetera. So that's what the purpose of it was. On average, it closed that pay gap, that 66 pay gap, by half. So it closed it by about 30%. Each employee of our 2210 IT Specialist Series received a special salary rate. That's how it was designed to do. And on average, that was, I believe, a 17% pay increase for those IT specialists that we had on board.
And this is the existing staff?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Just clarifying.
Yep. I do want to mention, though, that there is a cap. The federal compression of pay still limits them. If you're bringing in like a GS-15, Step 10, they're still capped at the max.
And how many of the staff received that pay increase?
I can take that number for the record, sir, and get it for you. But about, if I can give you an estimate, it's about 7,000 employees.
So clearly that wasn't used for recruitment. That was the folks that were already there. These are existing employees.
Yes, sir. And right now we have about just over 8,000 on board.
Right.
So the 1,000 that we've been able to.
My time has expired. I will now yield to Ranking Member Surplus McCormick.
Thank you. I'd like to redirect my previous question, to Mr. Del Bene. Mr. Del Bene, pretty much what I'm asking is that the 20% increase for cybersecurity is, impressive, and we're happy about that. But that's still the lowest funding throughout the whole federal government for cybersecurity. And VA holds large amounts of personal information and personal identifiable information. What's your explanation for the disparity between how much we're funding VA, even though it's holding such information?
Well, thanks for the question. I don't think I can speak to the path at how we got here. I will say a couple of things. One, I'm happy about the increase, as you mentioned. The second thing is, since I arrived, we have been really focused around two aspects of our cybersecurity program, all of it consistent with zero trust. The first thing is just to do better in terms of our certification when a system comes up for review for an ATO, Authority to Operate, making sure people really do a good analysis of.
Well, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but my question really is, if we're looking at other government agencies, this is still the lowest amount of funding for cybersecurity, and with the nature of VA holding all this personal information, what's the disparity between other agencies and the VA, because that's still a low number? And as you're answering that, I guess I might give you my second question also. Do you think that it's adequate, or do you think we're moving towards a more adequate number?
I think we're definitely moving towards a more adequate number. I don't think any of my person in my position is going to tell you they think that what they're spending on cybersecurity is adequate. Is the one you're really worried about. That is something you have to drive in every employee. And I, in fact, spent time in the staff meeting today of saying this is everybody's responsibility to make sure that the systems that you review and that you manage are secure, which means you should be paranoid about where the points of vulnerability, and you should need to raise those to the team at large so that we can fix them.
And so do you feel that the current funding request for VA for cybersecurity is adequate to address the issues with securing veterans' personal health information and protecting their critical IT programs?
Well, as I said, I don't think anybody in my position says in security that they wouldn't want more money, and I'd certainly want more money for cybersecurity as well. I will also say we don't put that investment everywhere in the same way. So we look at places where there are things like veterans data, and we focus there as well as one of the high-risk areas, because
But do you feel it's adequate is my question.
Do I believe it's adequate? I believe we will be able to work within the funding that we have been, that's in the budget.
And how have the recent impacts on ransom attacks changed your perception on the need for increased cybersecurity spending for VA IT systems?
They have reinforced that with me. I am not new to the industry, and I've seen these kinds of attacks before. I think it just brings home the importance of us having a very structured and sophisticated cybersecurity program.
I was glad to see data prioritized as a key priority of the CIO in the fiscal year 2025 budget. However, I was concerned to see that only dedication of funds for data efforts would be directed towards standard operations and maintenance. I worry that this is keeping the lights on budget will actually be more destructive and delay the modernization of VA healthcare, benefits, delivery, and IT infrastructure. With this budget, how is VA working to bring groundbreaking technology to benefit veterans while also balancing veterans' privacy?
Well, the one investment I would highlight, and I'll probably pass it over to Mr. Beard, because he's been focusing on our data efforts in particular with the folks with our chief data officer as well. I think we are investing in the budget has money set aside for AI. I think there are huge opportunities for us to transform the experience for veterans in the AI space, particularly on the healthcare space, and aiding doctors in being more effective with their time, for example. But let me pass it over to Mr. Beard on the data question more broadly.
Sure, and thank you for the interest in data, because it is a passion of mine. What we're focusing on in VA is really reuse of data, and we have a lot of data assets, but traditionally they've been stovepiped within the department. So we're really focused on data sharing and making sure our systems talk to each other. So as part of our ongoing development, modernization, and sustainment efforts, we're focusing on those key infrastructure portions that support our data strategy. So platforms, data lakes, data bricks, these are all investments that have already been in our budget, and we're sustaining those. So those trajectories continue in our budget. We will not be able to do amazing modernization efforts in FY25, but we will be able to sustain the work we're doing on data interoperability and consistent definition of authoritative data and reuse within our environment.
Thank you so much. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Representative Self, recognize you for 5 more minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Del Bene, because of your long history with Microsoft, you had an ethics waiver to take your current position. Now that you've served for 2 years, are there any restrictions in your waiver that no longer apply?
Thank you for the question. I'm able to speak to members of Microsoft in a place that well, not strictly part of the ethics restriction we thought was good practice of me not reaching out to anybody in Microsoft. We still believe that I should do that with other folks involved, such as our strategic sourcing organization. And then I will not be involved in discussions around business relationships with Microsoft. So Mr. Beard takes over on those mostly, or
Okay, so
exclusively.
let's dive into the words. The waiver allows you to participate in particular matters of general applicability. It does not allow you to participate in particular matters involving specific parties affecting Microsoft. That's some pretty dense language.
Yes.
Can you quickly explain to us what that means?
I can tell you what I believe it means, and I actually think we have over-exercised beyond that as well. I have mostly not spoken to my past colleagues at Microsoft over the past 2+ years. We've just said that's the safest thing for us to do. What it does say is that in general compute capability questions like how the desktop software, the Windows functions, that's a general thing. Like we have a fleet of hundreds of thousands of PCs. I could engage in a discussion around where should that go in terms of a particular capability. I would never engage in a question like, should we purchase this software from Microsoft or another one? That would be a specific situation where I would absolutely not be involved.
So who decides if it is a particular matter of general applicability or the other where you need to recuse yourself? Who makes that determination?
Well, in most cases, as I said, we've overperformed. I've just not been involved at all. And, but generally speaking, OGC would, Office of General Counsel.
Okay,
And we
so
would, if I may, just to finish, we have an Office of Strategic Sourcing with Ms. Luanda Jones, who runs that organization. And she is very diligent about making sure that I'm following the confines with consultation from OGC.
So how many times have you recused yourself?
I haven't officially recused myself, but I've basically said I am staying away from anything business related to Microsoft. So go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman.
One more question before you. So you have no documentation of any recusals?
These business relationships have never been in my hands. They've always been moved in Mr. Beard's hands, so I've had no need to actually officially recuse myself on paper. I have been involved in no business with Microsoft since I joined this organization.
That is correct, sir. I am the agency official that handles all matters related to Microsoft procurement, sales, and our relationships with those teams. Only if there's an operational issue in the morning, something is broken overnight, Mr. Del Bene leads all of those operational calls and talks about break-fix engineering issues. Anything that veers anywhere close to sales or the relationships with our contract, our usage of contract service, or commitment of dollars, those are exclusively mine. I handle them completely.
So would you say that you can cause directly or indirectly, Mr. Del Bene, the purchase of any Microsoft product?
I would say I cannot. And I have been very disciplined about it. I will tell you that the main thing I've done in the past 2.5 years has been very hard on Microsoft whenever they've had an operational issue.
Meaning what?
Meaning they are in these morning meetings, and I call them to task when they haven't performed in the way that we expect them to.
So a couple of scenarios. We've got, let me see, where do I want to go here? What is a Microsoft Governance Council?
Mr. Del Bene actually has very little knowledge of that because I run that. So each of the executives that report to me and our CTO, Charles Worthington, are part of a board of experts that consider how we use Microsoft products and other vendor products to deliver outcomes for VA and for veterans.
Okay, Mr. Del Bene, have you ever participated in any meetings or conversations reference the Microsoft Governance Council?
No.
Then,
Wait, that have referenced the Microsoft or have been not on any business whatsoever? I may have been in a meeting where somebody said there is a Microsoft Governance Council. I don't want to be unclear there. I have not been involved in any of the business relationships in Microsoft at all.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back. My time is up.
Thank you, Mr. Self. I will now recognize Representative Landsman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to go back to the HR piece. Mr. Tierney, you talked about the pay inequities, and we're seeing this across federal agencies and government in general, just having a hard time keeping pace with private sector wages, and as a result, just not being able to get the workforce that we need. And you mentioned the work that you all have done. And when you reached out, obviously compensation matters, work-life balance matters. I think you said growth was up there. We've heard that one of the issues has to do with the time it takes when when somebody applies for a job to when you ultimately make the offer. That's, I don't know if this is true or not, but in my head I have 6 months. So if you could imagine, if you're an engineer or you're somebody who has multiple, opportunities, that's going to be an issue, right? So pay is a piece, but if it takes 6 months to hear back, you may have lost a lot of talent in that period of time. I guess two questions. One is that an accurate assessment? If not, please set the record straight. if it is an issue, whether it's 6 months or shorter or longer, what can we do to be helpful? What are you all doing that is should give us hope, and or do you need this committee to take some action to expedite that so that isn't an issue, if in fact it is?
That's a great question. I read a Gartner article about 6 months ago, and it said for a technologist who's actually looking for a job, within 10 days they have 3 job offers. Our average time to hire was 146 days. That means I can't be competitive, right? So recently, OIT did not have their HR authorities. We're about to get our HR authorities under 40 USC, which is what the CIO has for IT resource management. That helps us in our ability to attract and retain talent. Let me be specific. My other title is as the Chief Myth-Busting Officer. And here's why. I go on LinkedIn for some live events, and I say, hey, here's why you want to come work for us. I leverage our competitive brand. I mean, I'm a retired veteran, and we have the opportunity to deliver quality IT products and services to veterans like myself and Tim, and that matters. And so I go on there and I debunk the myths of salary, of time off, of the products we're working on, the data, all the healthcare data, et cetera, the cybersecurity. And you build some excitement. And then I field questions, and I get about 40 to 50 questions in about a 30-minute block. That's optimizing our offer and capitalizing on our value prop. The second thing we've done is we've optimized our search criteria, to your point. We leverage data now, like LinkedIn Talent Insights and whatnot, to source candidates into either a virtual or an in-person hiring event, and we've led that with OPM and other federal agencies with their tech-to-gov events, and that's yielded how we've grown our staff by about 1,000 as a result of this.
If those are pretty stark numbers, so if, very helpful, sorry, I didn't mean to
problem, no.
The 10 days for the average engineer versus 140 in the VA, will what you just talked about get that 140 down? If so, to what? And is there a way to get it down to 10? I mean, I'm just,
Yeah. Actually, I think so, sir. And with these HR authorities, the deal is I lose credibility. If I source you to a job event and I can't give you a job offer on the spot, that's not cool. Right? So I think I can get this reduced down significantly. Give me an opportunity to try, and you can judge me by my results over this next fiscal year.
I think it would be very helpful for the committee to track this with you. It seemed to me salary is tough. Obviously, we have to be competitive, but there are budget restrictions and work-life balance. That is obviously something that you have to be able to sell. Growth is also it is more complicated, but getting that number down should be doable. And I think it would be very helpful for us to just see where we are every 90 days, maybe, whatever you think is appropriate. If it's 140 now, what will it be in 90 days? And then what we could be doing to help. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Representative Landsman. Mr. Del Bene, you started a campaign in 2022, which we've been touching on, during the tech slump to hire employees from Silicon Valley companies. I believe you said in the press that you hope to hire as many as 1,000 employees. How many of those people were hired through this campaign?
Go ahead.
Sir, we have about 434 hired. But I would like to caveat that with we did not have our HR authorities, and we're only recently regaining them, so that was substantially tough on our team. And what I mean by not having HR authorities, sir, is that meant I can't post my own job announcement. I can't do my own technical evaluation of the person, determined, yep, they're qualified.
But that was a process that was in place when Mr. Del Bene made his statement about what his goal was.
Yes, sir.
Okay. It wasn't changed. The process wasn't changed as you began this. Process was in place. You set your goal at 1,000. So we've got 434. Okay. Mr. Tierney, what is the current average tenure of your OIT employees?
Sir, I believe the average tenure is 16 years right now.
16 years. Okay. How many employees does OIT have today?
We have about 8,000 on board. I can provide you the exact number. this evening
Appreciate
or tomorrow, if you don't mind.
So how many of those employees were hired since 2022 when the special salary rate was created?
Total, I believe this fiscal year has been 464. In totality, I think we've been at 1,000. And I can get that exact number for what we've hired from July 17th of 2023
Okay,
till present.
so let me make sure I understand this. The increased compensation was put in place to attract new talent from Silicon Valley. However, to date, the funds were used to provide 85% of the existing staff with pay raises.
If I may,
Is that accurate? Before we go off on some rabbit hole, is that accurate? 85% of the current, roughly, employees receive the increases.
I don't want to check the math here, but it's roughly correct. The point I wanted to make, though, is there is no way for us to increase the salary of just new employees within the confines
That's
of-
fine.
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're really clear that 85% of the existing folks who have a tenure of about 16 years received a 17% increase. Mr. Del Benny, I understand your objective to use the special salary rate to make OIT a more attractive place to work and recruit new talent. Get it. But does that doesn't seem to be what happened. We
Well, it
brought in
has.
400, we brought in 400 people.
It's a journey.
Average tenure is still 16 years.
It's a journey, and we need to, if we've made progress in 1 year, we'll make progress in the next as well. The point I want to make also,
And have we
though, is-
also implemented, though, like a freeze and when people leave, that we're not bringing new employees in?
what we do is, because of the tightness of headcount, we evaluate every position as it becomes available. But if I may, I want to make sure it's clear, the employees at OIT deserve that increase as well. These are people that are committed to
Mr.
serving.
Del Benny, not arguing that.
Okay.
What I'm trying to do, though, is make sure that the general public that's watching this understands that there are things that are being done to drive a lot of your budget into the HR department. Mr. Del Benny,
It's
please.
just not that much of the budget.
A lot of money is being driven into the HR department, and we are starting to starve the very, very purpose of your department, which is technology, okay? And I'm afraid, as I'm looking forward, because I've seen this scenario play out, that what you're doing is betting on Congress. You're betting on your increases coming through. So you're going to go, and then what we're seeing here in this budget is a starving of the actual purpose of your department, technology, and we're plussing up HR, and that's creating a long-term problem. With that, I'm going to yield to Ranking Member
If I
Schultz
may,
McCormick.
Mr. Del Benny, you may continue.
Thank you. The SSR is not a significant portion of our budget in the absolute terms. And I would do it again because we need the most important resource we have as an organization, bar none, is our people.
Thank you, Mr. Del Benny. My question goes back to my concerns about this keep the lights on budget, especially since we're focusing on the standard operations and maintenance budget. Now, how are you going to, is there enough money in this budget, or do you believe that's adequate for mitigating and preventing against future attacks for the VA and also its partner systems, like the one we saw with Change Healthcare in February?
I don't think, and I'm not trying to avoid the question, I don't think there's ever, you can't take an amount and say as a result of that amount, we've we've prevented every potential incursion. Some of the stuff we do doesn't actually require incremental investment. I will say, and I think most CIOs in this position would say they'd like more for cybersecurity, and I would say that too. I am very happy that we're making the incremental investments. I was just telling my team before, as I mentioned before, the first thing you need to do, and don't do any new features until you make sure that you're secure as an organization.
Well, I
so
guess-
regardless, it's the top priority.
Well, I guess my question really is, since the budget is really focusing on maintaining and keeping everything intact, if there is a cyber attack, how would you, is there any money there to mitigate, for not just the VA, but
to
also?
mitigate.
Yeah, to mitigate any cyber attacks.
We would shift people off of what they're doing to mitigate as the absolute highest priority. There's nothing higher than if you're in the middle of an incident, it's all hands on deck, that's all you worry about.
So there's funding that you can shift for those situations?
We would basically, we would stop a lot of stuff. We would, in this one-to-end list, a bunch of stuff would fall down the list, and the mitigation work would be the number one thing we would do.
And what is preventing the VA from making improvements in standing on the FSMA audits?
Oh, that's a complicated question. I think FSMA as a process is very broad and more of a compliance exercise than it is a risk-based analysis of the places where you have the greatest risk. I have talked to everybody who will listen about this question. It needs to get more focused on where the biggest risks are. In that kind of world where it's compliance-based, it becomes super easy to find those places of weakness, quote unquote, by the numbers. What we focus on, and I have a very good relationship with OIG in this area, I look through what they found and say, which are the ones I really care about that impact our security in particular, and those are the ones that we focus on for the team. There's a bunch of other stuff that it's like, yep, strictly speaking, you've got me. I will also say that historically, we have been an organization that has a lot of, that did security by policy, not by risk analysis. And what you get when you have an organization that does that is you get a lot of policy. And not all that policy actually can be implemented universally, and not all that policy is necessary in terms of being the highest risk things. And so we have shifted towards doing analysis of real risk that could potentially lead to an attack.
And what resources do you need to gain ground in this area?
It's a mixture of resources. What's called the ISSO, the Information Security Officer, is probably the boots on the ground that need to look at each and every system. I need to upskill those folks, and they are energized to do so, but they need to be the first point of contact that says, I understand my system, I understand the gaps in my system. I think the other place that I've really pushed hard on is having external people try to come into the system, and against our knowledge, we'll be monitoring everything as we do, but these what are called red teams, I believe a lot that red teams are an important part of your security posture. Those are typically best done by external folks. They're also very expensive resources, but we just have to make the money and the funds available in the budget for things like red teams.
And how would you evaluate the risk right now for a cyber attack to the VA?
It's a hard one to answer. I am never happy with our cyber posture, and any good CIO would tell you the same thing.
Do you feel that it's increased or decreased?
Do I feel that's increased or decreased? I think hard to say, it's a subjective measure. I think we've improved our cyber posture over the past couple of years.
Thank you, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. I'll now recognize Representative Self.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Del Bene, so you have told us that there are Microsoft executives in morning meetings. You have told us that you have been tough on Microsoft on actual contract performance. You have told us that there has been no official recusal. You have told us that there is no documentation of any official recusal. I remind you, sir, that you are under oath. How in heaven's name is not that at least indirect, if not direct, influence over actual Microsoft contracts? From what you have told us this afternoon.
I am highly confident I have had no influence on Microsoft's acquisitions of Microsoft products from the VA.
But you're narrowly saying acquisition. I'm talking about influence over contracts.
The presumption that I spent my career in Microsoft and would not be objective, relative to the commitment I have made to this organization, I just don't accept. They are my previous
It's not a presumption,
employer.
Mr. Del Bene. You have testified to this committee to that effect. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Mr. Tierney, how much has OIT ceiling for full-time equivalent employees been reduced since the special salary rate went into effect?
Sir, the number we're using, and Tim, please confirm, for this fiscal year is 8,150. FTE is what we're looking for this year. And as I mentioned, we have about 8,000 on board. And with the FY25 budget, we believe that number goes to 8,310. But Tim, do you want to confirm that?
That's correct.
Walk through that again. So you're,
I apologize. Maybe I'm not understanding the question, sir.
I'm trying to
what is
figure
our
out where
headcount
the,
reduced?
what you're doing with your FTEs. Your ceiling for full-time equivalent employees, your ceiling has been reduced since the special salary rate went into effect, has it not?
Yes. Yes, it has. Let me get the numbers.
Let me answer your question, Congressman. We reduced approximately 800 people based on what the equivalent cost of the special salary rate would be. It was approximately 140 to 160 million dollars for the, as we've talked about, 7,000 employees to drive that 17% increase.
I'm just trying to get the FTEs that you have reflected in your budget at the before the awards went into place and where they are now. So before they went into place, the FTEs, the ceiling for your FTEs, and I understand what's actually there at any given day fluctuates, but your ceiling, you've asked for a reduction in the ceiling, correct?
Congressman, if I could, please. So at the time that we made the determination to implement the special salary rate, we did not have we had a ceiling number based on funds availability. We decided as an executive team at a strategic offsite, all 40 executives in the Office of Information and Technology talked through the trade-offs, and intentionally we decided as a team that we were going to go for implementation of the special salary rate and intentionally reduce our available headcount. We didn't have bodies in those billets, so no one was riffed. We did that strategically as a leadership team in order to recruit better talent and to reward the talent we had on board. As you know, all the money in the world that brings in new equipment, printers, computers, they do not deploy themselves at hospitals and clinics around the country. We need talented staff out in the field in order to do that. So starving salary for staff in order to do modernization, we have to do a balance between that, and that's what we do as a leadership team. We think through these issues, and we work very hard to make solid trade-offs.
And I understand that, Mr. Beard. So
support
this
VA's mission.
committee, that what our understanding was, is that there was going to be a demand for additional staff, not higher compensation for the existing staff, but there was going to be a high demand for additional staff in order to implement all of this administrative process that was going to be generated by the PACT Act. That's what we were told. That's what we were told. Meanwhile, what I see is that we've got a ceiling FTE cap at 8,150 now, and Mr. Tierney, you issued a memo on November 16, 2023, setting a head count of 8,270 and instituting several procedures to restrict new hiring. What was the authorized head count when the special salary rate went into effect? What was the head count at that point?
For that fiscal year in July of 2023, and I can confirm the number, we were shooting for 8,668, I believe was the authorized headcount we were trying
8,668.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so again, there's is where I'm trying to peel this onion back. So we're being told as a committee that we're going to need these additional staff. I understand compensating people properly. I understand trying to attract talent. But what we are being told is that we have to have these additional FTEs to make sure that this process is working. What is the authorized head count for OIT employees today? What is
8,150, sir.
Okay. The OIT budget requests, total full-time equivalents for 24 are 8,243, plus 139 from the Toxic Exposure Fund. That's 8,382. It also says for 2025, there are 8,405 plus 139 from the Toxic Exposure Fund. That's 8,544. That's what's in the budget request. How do you reconcile those numbers with the authorized headcount in your memo that's asking for 8,150?
If I may, I suggest, let's go back and work with your staff to get you the numbers that you're looking for.
I would appreciate that, because the budget request is looking at 8382, and what you're saying, and we have a memo that shows that you're trying to hold it at 8150.
Now, 81, again, we're probably better off if we get you the exact numbers that you're looking for. 8150 is the current number. 83, whatever that number is what's in the budget per se. But let's work with your staff and get you the numbers that you're looking for.
Okay. Mr. Del Bene, it appears that rather than expanding the workforce, that your office is struggling to afford the special salary rate and is throttling back hiring and cutting the workforce. So the payroll is continuing to grow as the workforce itself is shrinking. And again, as we get these demands saying we have to have the additional staff.
Well, the request for additional staff is fairly modest in this budget. I will say that the staff hasn't shrunk, and that's why you mentioned the memo that Nate put out that basically went through the process of how you get a position reapproved. That's the goal there, is to shape the organization and put that head count where it's most impactful to the mission. And I do think we have an opportunity to take some particular roles that are less impactful, and as they turn over, put them on jobs that are more impactful for the organization. I will also say I would do the special salary rate again, even if we have to find room for it. As you mentioned and as others have mentioned, we have to pay people appropriately, and based on at least trying to get things close to
And
what the
Mr.
market
Del Bene, I
bears.
appreciate that. I am well over my time, and I apologize. But the fact of the matter is, I'm very concerned that you're directing all these funds into HR. You're starving these other sections, and then you're going to come back and ask for a supplemental or use some of these fungible funds that you're describing. With that, I yield to Ranking Member Sheriff-List McCormick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Del Bene, this subcommittee has been paying close attention to VEA's efforts to address its tech debt. So I'm concerned when I saw the 65% cut to the infrastructure readiness program. It's hard to see this lack of prioritization return. How is the aging infrastructure impacting the work of the frontline staff?
I think, as I said earlier, I don't think the reduction that we have done to the information or the infrastructure readiness program can be sustained over multiple years. I actually think we will be okay to do that for this 1 year of the budget, because we have made investments in the IRP over multiple years leading up to that. There was a comment made earlier about 10 minutes for a PC to boot. Mm-hmm. We have statistics on the boot time of all PCs every day in the VA. That, I don't even know that's, when we talk about long times for boot, we talk about 5 minutes, which I'm unhappy with. But they're not as significant as what was implied. We do that because we've invested in technology that monitors the performance of end users. Right now, end users are pretty happy with the PCs and the compute experience. They give us very high marks for that in terms of their customer satisfaction. I think we'll be okay in this year of execution. I don't think it's sustainable over multiple years.
How will this cut impact VA's effort to address the years of neglect of its IT infrastructure?
With we will have to push out some of that IT infrastructure modernization. I think this is a challenge we're going to live with.
And what's your plan to get the IRP back on track? And how many years will that take?
Well, as I said, I think because we've had multiple years where it's been in good shape, I think we're okay. I think I'll have to come to you all with the next budget and say, that's a number that we can't cut again. And you have my commitment that I will come back to you with that sort of an ask.
So if we had approximately how many years do you think? Would that be next year's budget, the following year?
Well, we're talking about the 25 budget here. I think we can't, I don't think I would support a sustainment of that kind of a cut over multiple years.
So just for this year then?
I think we can deal with it with this year, yes.
Thank you, I yield back.
That brings us to the conclusion of our hearing. Would you like to, Sheriff-List McCormick, go into your closing statements?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the testimony and answers from our witnesses this afternoon. Our time today has been important to highlight an expansive but often under-recognized aspect of providing high-class health care to veterans, VA's IT infrastructure. I have serious concerns that the budget we have discussed today, one primarily focused on keeping the lights on, will diminish VA's ability to be effective in its mission. I worry that by not prioritizing VA's aging IT infrastructure, we're doing a disservice to veterans as well as those faithful servants dedicated to VA's numerous ongoing modernization efforts like VBMS, FMBT, and Digital GI Bill. I look forward to working with the chairman and VA to ensure that VA is well prepared for the future. Lastly, I'd like to add something to the chairman's remarks regarding the timeliness of VA's testimony. I don't want to speak out of turn, but I think one common goal among all parties here is to strive for collaboration and transparency. Receiving the testimony for this hearing a mere 3 hours before we begin is not productive to a collaborative or transparent conversation. I hope we can work forward in improving this communication moving forward. Thank you so much, and I yield back.
Thank you very much, Ranking Member. I want to thank our witnesses for joining us this afternoon. I don't think that anyone in this room believes the VA information and technology budget requests would be helpful or improve service for our veterans. The administration decided to reallocate a modest amount of money away from OIT to other parts of the VA. I can understand that, but it's extremely disappointing that whoever wrote this budget request designed the cuts in the most lopsided, damaging way possible. This is not a haircut. This is a lobotomy to a few of the office's core capabilities. I would like to see a successful project get rewarded and failing projects be terminated. But slashing half the funding for some of the key systems that have been struggling is a recipe for disaster. It's also disappointing that the Toxic Exposure Fund is merely being used to plug budget holes when the bureaucracy finds it convenient, not to boost the VA's ability to serve toxic exposed veterans as Congress intended. And I have already been in conversations with my colleagues over in the Senate to have that conversation. I'm very concerned that the special salary rate, which may have been well-intended, will become completely unaffordable when combined with this budget and undermine the organization. This situation risks spinning out of control. I'm not going to tolerate the VA workforce being hollowed out while the contractors escape untouched. So I'll be waiting to hear that information from you as well, Mr. Delbenny. The subcommittee will keep a close eye on OIT's budget and management over the course of this year. We expect VA to deliver the modern, user-friendly tools to help veterans access the care and benefits that they have earned. We can't let the bureaucratic politics in Washington get in the way of that. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. With no objection, this hearing is adjourned.